All right, guys, I'm going to have you listen to The New Kid since we didn't get to listen to that story the other day. So make sure you pay close attention. Here we go.
The New Kid. Have you ever had a friend help you when you felt lonely, sad, or scared? I was sitting on my porch with George when the girl next door stopped by. George is my parrot. I was trying to teach George to repeat the word hippopotamus. "Hi," the girl said. "I'm Jade, and I live next door. I hear you're new in town." "I'm Lucy," George squawked. "No, I'm Lucy," I told her. "This is George, my parrot." I couldn't think of anything else to say, so I just sat there staring at George with my cheeks red hot and my hands tightly clasped. I was very shy about meeting new people and very nervous about starting a new school tomorrow. I must have looked really worried because Jade smiled kindly and said, "My mom says we're in the same class. Isn't that great? Everybody's really nice. You'll like our teacher, Mr. Walker, too. He's nice and does great projects with his class." "I'm Lucy," George squawked loudly again, opening his hooked beak wide as he ruffled his feathers and flapped his wings rapidly. George likes to repeat whatever I say, which can be a problem. "George is a hippopotamus," George squawked. "This is George," I repeated. "I taught him that." Then George decided to quietly eat an apple slice. That was a huge relief because George can be extremely embarrassing. "Peace at last," I said as Jade and I laughed about George's squawking. Suddenly, Jade's mom called to her. "I need to go," Jade said. "I'll save you a seat tomorrow if I get to school first," Jade shouted as she ran home. "Promise?" I shouted back. "Absolutely," Jade said. Then she ran through the grass and across the small garden, turning and waving as her mom called again. I was still nervous about school, but I thought it might not be as bad as I first thought. Jade kept her promise the next day. She saved me a seat in the front row. "My name is Mr. Walker," our teacher said, "and we have a new student this year. Tell us something about yourself, Lucy." I wanted to shrink to the size of a bug and crawl under my desk. My face must have turned bright red with a look of panic because Jade started talking really fast. "Lucy lives next door. She's my friend, and she's really nice. And her parrot, George, knows how to say all kinds of ridiculous, bizarre things." Suddenly, everybody was laughing and talking about George. "I want to meet George," someone said. "Can Lucy bring George to school?" someone asked. "That's a great idea," Mr. Walker said. "We'll all meet George tomorrow." Bring George to school? What would the other kids think if George said something embarrassing? I wondered. "Don't worry," Jade whispered. "I'll help you." It took me a long time to fall asleep that night. I kept trying to remember all the embarrassing things George had heard me say. I wondered if he'd embarrass me tomorrow. My dad and I took George to school the next day. "Say hello to George, class," Mr. Walker said. "Hello, George," everybody called. "Hello, George," George squawked. Everybody laughed. "George is a hippopotamus," Jade shouted. "George is a hippopotamus," George squawked. Everybody clapped. After that, there was an awkward silence because George stopped talking, which was fine with me. I was still afraid he might say something outrageous. Then some of the other kids began talking to me. They asked if I wanted to play with them at recess. Dad took his time getting George's cage ready, and eventually they were leaving, and I began to relax. "Good job, George," Mr. Walker called. "Good job, George," everyone shouted. "Good job, George," George squawked. "Thanks for everything, Jade," I said. Thanks for helping me. Jade said, That's what friends are for. I was so happy. The first day at my new school was turning out to be one of the best days ever.